Hello, I am Tamera Darden. If you're ever worried about the pronunciation of my name, think of Sister Sister. It is spelled and pronounced the same way. I am a producer and photographer, the founder of Kim Productions, which I'll get into. And as Mike said, I am the writer of the Photo CEO Substack and book, which is coming out spring of 2024. Now, I know that I wanted to do a quick little intro about my story, but I'm only going to make it one page because I really want to talk to you guys about the importance of having a photo producer, why you should have a diverse producer, and also get into some examples of invoices of past projects that I have produced for. So really quickly, just a timeline, like why am I here? How did I get here? So in, what is this, 2008, 2014, I was an assistant buyer and an associate product manager at Macy's. And here I did a lot of analytical work. So really thinking about, how much something costs, doing negotiations with overseas factories, trying to figure out how to find the right materials to make the right merchandise. And as you'll probably see as we go through this timeline, being able to really flex my negotiation skills definitely comes in handy when you are trying to advocate for yourself in the photography industry. In 2015, I began wardrobe styling and doing a lot of odd jobs. So I consider 2015 my limbo period. And here I just dabbled in a lot of things. So I did visual merchandising, social media management. I also did closet design and selling at the Container Store. And although these jobs were very odd, I was able to take a lot of the skills that I learned within each role to help me in building my production company. Selling being one of those things, or learning how to sell without thinking about your own wallet. So then in 2016, I had a little come to Jesus moment, because even though wardrobe styling was great, I was tired of chasing checks. Like, I wanted to be the one that had control of how much I made and when I made it. And I still wanted to be creative. I knew I didn't want to go back to a traditional 9 to 5. And Instagram was popping out on the scene. If you remember Instagram when it was still chronological, that is what was happening. And so I decided to transition to product styling and doing creative direction. And a fun fact, my first clients, I shot their products with my iPhone. Now, it was like an iPhone 5S, and today we're like, iPhone 15. So we have come a long way. And I am not showing those photos because they would be janky now compared to what my work looks like today. But it's all about starting with what you have. And so my first clients were Harper's Bazaar Digital and Macy's, which was a full circle moment, creating social media content for these brands. And I said, you know what? I think I'm onto something here. So in 2018 and 2019, I realized that if I put all of my services for my product photography and styling services under one offer and offered it as a full service production offer, that I would be able to increase my rates. So really packing it all up in one offer as opposed to piecemealing it. I found that I had more success offering it as one thing to my clients as opposed to allowing them to do a la carte. And so I realized, after seeing, double revenue increases year over year, that, okay, I think this is, or not I think, but this is the right thing. I am moving on to the right direction. But I didn't want to work with small businesses anymore. I wanted to actually transition to offering services to commercial clients. And so in 2020, that is the direction that I wanted to move to. I knew that offering production services to commercial clients meant bigger budgets. It also meant having the opportunity to transfer generational wealth by hiring other amazing artists. And also it allowed me to kind of step out of doing all of the roles that was required in order to do the job and really only focus on being a producer and a photographer. And we all know what happened in 2020. The panini happened. That's what I like to call the pandemic. The panini happened. And so I really thought, oh no, I guess my life is over. But surprisingly, from 2020 to 2023, I saw my biggest revenue increases with the model that I started in 2018. And I don't like to talk about numbers because the numbers are just a small part of the story. But when I looked at the numbers and I added it all up, the business was able to bring in, or I was able to book about $500,000 of booked receipts between 2020 and 2023, which for someone who is not agency represented, who, you know, was a self-taught photographer, who was kind of like piecemealing as they go, that is no easy feat. And I realized eventually that I wanted to produce for other photographers. And so today, you know, Kin Productions, we are a women-led photo and video production company for beauty and lifestyle brands. The company has served over 100 clients worldwide since 2016, including Framebridge, Kinlo by Naomi Osaka, Essence Magazine, Madewell, Burt's Bees, and recently Lion Post for Sephora. And as I just recently shared, you know, my goal is to extend production and producer services to other photographers here in the DMV area, as well as nationally, as well as talent management. So offering management and production services to our talent roster. Now, before I get into production, I had a conversation with Carlene Martin, who, if you don't know Carlene, you must be living under a rock, but she is an amazing producer that's based here in the DMV area. And I had a conversation with her at the top of the year, just asking her for insight about transitioning into the producer role. And something that she said to me that really stuck out to me was, everyone knows who the producer is when the production does not go smoothly. I believe that being a producer means that if no one knows who you are, that means you're doing a great job. If people do not have to chase after you, or if you lack the ability to anticipate your client's needs, whether it is the brand or the photographer, depending on who brought you on, then there may be a disconnect. And so I think about this quote when I think about what a producer does. So why would you need a photo producer? I think it's helpful to kind of have a definition so that we all understand what a producer does. So I went to the AMA, which is a really great resource, the Artist Management Association. And a producer is someone who is responsible for overseeing and providing production services that can include, but is not limited to, employing the crew, contracting any vendors, providing insurance, securing third-party releases. I also want to add on here, managing the budget, which pricing is a huge thing for photographers. That's also something that a producer can do. To simplify it, another analogy, and I shared this at a happy hour, but another analogy I like to use is a producer serves as an orchestra's conductor, right? So we make sure that everyone that's a part of the crew, everyone that's a part of the team, works seamlessly together to create a beautifully composed piece, or in this case, assets, whether that's video or images or both, right? So The key here is making sure that we are working from a place of proactivity as opposed to reactivity. And what I have found is that many artists, whether that's photographers, videographers, or even the agencies themselves that are looking to hire a team, they tend to lack the time, the patience, the resources to focus on the creative and also the project management and analytical or the logistics for a project, which is where we would come in. So other services that a producer would be responsible for. So as I said, hiring, casting, project budgeting, talent releases, location scouting, day of coordination, right? So day of coordination can be sending out the call sheets, the call times, ordering craft services, because we all need to eat, right? Serving as a liaison between the client and the crew, managing the flow of the day, alerting the photographer of any client adjustments to adjust the timelines, etc. Pre-production management, post-production management. So that is managing the retouchers, following how many times or how many rounds of revisions are included in the agreement, and also the file management. So I think when you look at this list, you know, as photographers, because that is my, I guess, original introduction into this industry, you know, we do these things a lot of the time without even thinking about it, right? Like we do it as if it's second nature. And then eventually what tends to happen is the more projects that we get or the bigger the opportunities, we start to feel overwhelmed, right? We feel overwhelmed. And so we take that overwhelm to mean I shouldn't do this anymore, right? Like photography, like it's not working, it's too much, I'm burned out. When really it should be an opportunity for you to step back and say, what are some of the tasks that need to be outsourced so that I can focus solely on doing the creative? And that is when you would say, I think I need a producer for this job. So what makes a successful production? So I actually did go to the AMA, and they actually have guidelines in association with the Association of Independent Commercial Producers. And it's chock full of stuff. But I wanted to just summarize it under 3 things. So what makes a successful production is payment, because we got to get paid, or the budget, the project, which is the scope of work, and the people. So I like to work in 3s, and I like to create acronyms. So the 3 P's of a successful production. I know it's cheesy, but that's how I'm able to remember things. So project, your scope of work, right? One thing that I like to tell creatives, photographers, or agencies is that producers are not magicians. We are not mind readers. Like we can anticipate changes, but with the information in advance, right? So this means asking upfront before you are signing on the dotted line, right? Do we need stills? How many images? Do you need motion? How many videos? Is it in studio? Is it on location? Is it both? What's the turnaround time? Is there a rush fee? How many models? What ethnicity? Do we need a makeup artist? What's the usage? Where's the shoot? Prep days. And if you are starting to palpitate as I am saying these questions aloud, then you probably need a producer, right? You probably need someone to help lighten the load for you. But I will say, like, this information helps to dictate who would be a great fit for a project, whether that is the team, but also the budget. So the way I like to wrap this up when it comes to a successful production and you're thinking about your project or the scope of work, you should never make assumptions. You should always pick up the phone. I hear so many people who have like this allergic reaction to just simply picking up the phone and speaking to someone to get clarity. A lot of people like to lean on emails, and emails are great, but a lot of the times you're going to lose a lot of context if you are reliant on email only. I am very old school. So if I need clarity or if it is a discovery call or the initial contact, I'm picking up the phone or setting up a Zoom call so that I can get all the information that I need. Especially if you are, let's say you're a brand and, or rather you're the photographer, of course, and a brand reaches out to you and you are getting this information. If you want to bring on a producer, it's going to be your responsibility to be able to disseminate all that information that the brand is telling you, because then your producer is able to be your advocate, right? Then your producer is able to stand in the gap between you and the brand with the information that you're providing for them. So never make assumptions, pick up the phone, make sure that you communicate everything that you need in order to successfully do the job. The second thing is people. Teamwork makes the dream work. And I've been really blessed to have really amazing crews for pretty much every job that I've done. And there's a method to the madness for that, but a crew can make or break a project. So understanding the scope of work allows the producer to recommend or hire or recommend to the photographer the right team members for a project. So whenever I have a really big gig or whenever I have downtime, right? I think 2023 probably, a lot of us probably have a lot of downtime. This is a perfect opportunity to collaborate with local creatives and lean on your network, right? So scheduling tests or doing smaller projects with potential teammates or talent before the main event, before there are hundreds of thousands of dollars on the line, right? Another thing that I like to do, even if there is no project that is coming up immediately, is I like to ask for creatives rates in advance, right? So I like to know at the top of the year or maybe 6 months in, or whenever I work with someone and I really like their vibe, they're really great, they anticipate needs, etc. I like to ask for their rates in advance. And what I do with that information is I create a contact Rolodex with creatives rates, and I update it either once a quarter or once a year. This is extremely helpful for when a project comes across your desk and maybe they have a quick turnaround in terms of knowing how much everything is going to cost. Well, I already have that information, so I'm able to plug and play. Maybe I'll overestimate, which I'll get into in a bit, but at least I have that information immediately as opposed to feeling like I have to rush, right, and be reactive in order to get the information and place a bid. So the third thing of a successful production is payment. And I like to use this meme. We all know what this meme is. We probably have seen it across the interwebs on Instagram, where a brand asks, "What's your rate?" And then we ask, "What's your budget?" Point blank period. In my opinion, producers and photographers need to know the budget before committing to a project. Full stop, period. Okay, like we cannot create a budget out of thin air, right? Like we need to know how much you're willing to spend on this project so that we can have and hire the right team members that fit within your budget, but also the right team members that we know can successfully execute this job for you, right? Because knowing the budget allows us to answer logistics. So what is required to execute this project, whether it's talent, location, timing, alignment, like can we achieve what you're asking for with that budget? Or does the scope of work need to be adjusted? Like really getting comfortable with pushing back and negotiating and saying, okay, I know you said you want, 50 assets over the span of 2 days. And, our budget is 10 grand. Oh, well, I don't know if I can give you 50, maybe I can come back and say 25, over 2 days, right? So making sure that we have that information, the scope of work and the budget so that we can say, can we do this successfully or not? Other things that are really important, pay terms, right? Producers, and this is kind of like how I operate my business, whether like in the photographer role or the producer role, but we are required to be either paid in full for the first shoot day or 50 to 75% at contract signing. Now, some people may say that sounds like a lot, but if you are a photographer and you are running a business, you should be requiring a non-refundable deposit. I like to work with 50% upfront. This allows me to hire any team members, get any materials that I need, and then I pay myself on the back end once the project is done. And looking at the AICP guidelines, this is in line with their guidelines and also in agreement with the AMA. And you may be asking yourself, well, how does a producer get paid? Like, what is their rate? And that can vary. It can either be a flat rate or it can be a percentage of the total cost of the project. In my case, it can be itemized, like the rest of the components of the invoice. And the rate can be flexible, like it can really be based off of the scope of work. So just to kind of wrap up this section, like best practices when it comes to like working with a producer, or I think these are best practices, honestly, for any creative. The first thing is anticipating needs and changes and communicating them. You know, I have found in my experience is that most people understand a delay or a change in pricing, or even, you know, if there's a disappointment, if it's communicated early enough. And if you have a resolution, like a lot of times people will say, we can't do this. Okay, but can you do something else, right? Like having an answer or a response to that. Like, yes, we really do want to work with you. Unfortunately, this is not something that we can do. This person can. Or another resolution where everyone can walk away happy and no one feels like they're being taken advantage of. The second is maintaining boundaries. You know, even though we are in service and we are considered service providers, that does not mean that you are a pushover or a doormat, right? A good way to start establishing boundaries in your business is providing office hours, you know, and letting clients know how they can communicate with you. And it has to be done in several places, right? So whether that's in the agreement, it's the onboarding document, or in your project management system, like those are how you can maintain boundaries. And I wrote no need to get into the weeds, but provide assurances. So what do I mean by this? So let's say the simplest example I would say is retouching. Now, the more advanced, which is probably not the right adjective that I want to use, but photographers with more experience and access to bigger budgets, a lot of the times they're no longer doing their retouching. They're outsourcing that to a professional retouching company. You do not need to tell your client, hey, I don't do the retouching no more because I have a third-party company that does it. They don't need to know that, right? They just need to know, can you, with the money and the tools that you have and have access to, can you successfully complete this, right? So you do not need to get into the weeds of the how all the time, like the minutiae, right? But you need to be able to provide assurances. So an example of an insurance would be, you know, after you've made your selections, you will receive the first round of edits within 7 to 10 business days or 10 to 14 business days based off of the complexities of the edits, right? Much simpler, shorter, cleaner, to the point, as opposed to saying, well, I got to do this and I have to do that. Clients don't care. They just want to know, can you get the job done? Which should free you from feeling like you need to overshare or erode your own boundaries in order to get the job done, right? And the last thing, anything is negotiable. Anything is negotiable. I hope I can curse on here because we're adults, but shit happens, right? Your scope of work can change. There may need to be a reshoot, right? I think it's important to acknowledge the client's request, right? And in my experience, provide 1 or 2 options or solutions to adjust that scope of work, right? And a little trick, overestimate, right? So like having the base rate, sorry, I live near a fire station, y'all. Start with your base rate and then add any estimated costs. So a lot of the times, like if I'm hiring like talent under like models or makeup artists, sometimes their rates fluctuate. So I like to overestimate and just build that in. And then when they confirm the final images and they're ready to make their payment. So before you give any final assets, please make sure you get paid, y'all. I cannot stress that enough. But once they've approved their final images and now you have like the final rates for everything, you can adjust that in the second half of your invoice. And clients, it's easier to overestimate at the beginning of a project than to really underestimate and then try to ask for more at the end. So that's why I always recommend overestimating. So I actually have two examples. These are invoices from previous projects that I've done where I served as the photographer and the producer. So there is no producer line, to be quite honest, because I was doing both, and that's okay. That's fine. But just for reference, like this would be an example of an itemized shoot. And like the rate, as I said, is going to vary, like I think, there's so many conversations about pricing and knowing your worth. And, I feel like chart your worth is just really shitty advice. But like you should be charging based off of the value of what you offer, like what you can provide, what you can execute. Like, can you back that shit up, right? Can you back it up? And do you have a team in place that's going to help you get to the end game, right? Which is getting amazing assets and hopefully being asked to come back and work with this client again. So first line, of course, is the photographer. You can choose to roll up the assistance rate if you want to, or you can just have that a second itemized. Then equipment, usage. This is not a conversation about usage, so we're not even going to get into it. But I will say this about usage. Always charge more than you think for usage. But also, like, it's an individual thing, okay? Like it is whatever you're comfortable with, and understand like context. And then the studio rental. So the client actually ended up paying the balance directly to the studio. And what's not included here is the stylist. So we actually had a prop stylist. The prop stylist was recommended by me and was hired directly through or paid through the client. So this is one example. This is actually, it was a really small shoot. It was only 3 days, but in terms of what was needed, because we had all that information in advance, this is what the rate was. So it was about 13.3. There was a second payment on the back end for additional usage. So they wanted perpetuity about 2 years later. And so that was taken care of in a separate invoice. Now this is very different. So this was a job where I served as a co-producer and the photographer. So worked directly with the client. They gave us the creative brief. They told us how many images. They had a shot list, but I also provided creative direction, also provided the order of what we were going to shoot, had to hire, or not had, but was able to hire the entire team. I hired people that I already had relationships with, that I knew were reliable, that I knew were aligned creatively with what the client was looking for. This was for actually like a skincare clean beauty brand. So I knew which makeup artist to hire because I had worked with her before, right? So it's really all about networking, as I said before, when building out your team and like doing those test shoots, really seeing how people work together. And so for this project, it was $33,000. But as you can see, like, I think sometimes, a lot of times, you know, people will see these budgets and they'll think, 33. Wow, did the photographer get all that? Hell no. Only got a third of it, a third of it. But everyone else needed to be accounted for and taken care of. And so that is what we did. Actually, I'm going to pause right here to see if anyone has any questions, because I'm actually near the end and it's 12:37. So did anyone have any questions, thoughts, comments before I wrap this up?
I had a question.
Yes.
I know, like from what I've been doing, I usually lump my like creative day rate in with the licensing fee and just call it like a creative fee. That's like how I was taught to do it, but I think intuitively it makes sense how you're doing it, except for that it kind of bumps up against the idea that we have a day rate or an hourly rate.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know how to really answer that question when people are like, do you have an hourly rate? And I'm like, no, I mean, yes, but no. So can you just explain that a little bit?
In terms of like,
In terms of like, should I be saying, yes, I have an hourly rate,
okay.
but then there's a usage charge on top of that?
Oh, Elsie, you're gonna really hate my answer. All right, I have
Hit me
two.
with it. I'm ready.
I have two answers. I have two answers for that. The first answer is I don't have an hourly rate. I feel like it's just, why? Like, even if you say your shoot time is 2 hours, there's work that you need to do on the front end, maybe the planning, and then like the transportation to get there. And then there's work that you need to do on the back end. Like, you need to break down the set, breaking down the set, going back home, retouching, communication with the client. And
No, like I get all that, but do you think that by saying this is my day rate, 2,500, including my assistant, do you think then like somebody's brain would do the math backwards and be like, okay, this is how much it would cost hourly? That's more my question.
that's okay. Yes, thank you. No, in my experience, no.
Okay.
I have not bumped up against that. I think because I don't even use the word hourly. So I think sometimes we open the door, we keep the door open because, oh, I offer hourly, but here's my day rate. So then clients then kind of push back and they're like, so then what's your hourly? And so it's kind of, I think it's a little like play on psychology a little bit, if I'm
But then
being
so say you do
honest.
go over like the time that you'd agreed upon, and then you need to start paying like time and a half to your crew and things like that. It's just it's always been such a mental,
Yeah, it's a
'cause you have
struggle.
to have a
I
price
mean,
for that.
I don't. I mean, I wish I had more answers, but I don't want to pretend like I know it all, because I honestly do not. But I will say this, from my experience, when I offer a day rate, I always assume that it's going to be a full day,
Sure.
whatever that full day looks like for me. And that can mean I'm a little bit crazy or a workhorse. So like, if my start day or my start time is 8 o'clock, then I always know like 6 p.m., or 5:30, or however many hours we need to get 15 shots done in the day. Usually we never go past 6. But I make sure that I have a day rate that I'm happy with. And I also think like the clients that I work with, and again, I think this is just from experience, because I haven't had a lot of people bump up against this, is like, my clients have known, okay, this is her day rate. And then I ask, what's the usage? Like, how do you want to use this? And so there already is this understanding that it's a separate line item.
Yeah.
Or that's,
But
I
then
don't
do they
really
come back and they're like, oh, you have a day rate. So do you do a half day?
know.
See, It's like, they're
No,
so
I
manipulative.
don't even, I mean, I've tried doing half day rates. I have. And I've regretted it because it's never a half day.
So much regret, always.
It's never a half day. And so because you want to make it work. We want to make it work for the client, and we want to be friendly. We say, yeah, we could do a half rate. But mentally we don't. Like, it ends up not happening, you know? Yeah, I mean, there's some really good answers in the comments. So
Cool.
yeah,
I'll read the comments.
Mike, yeah, that's really great. And Hannah, that's really great too. Yeah, like my half day rate's the same as my full day rate.
Ooh, sneaky. I like that.
You know,
Yeah.
because we don't get paid. Like, you know, I mean, this conversation is not about pricing, which is a total. I mean, if you want me to come back, Mike, I can come back. But and talk about pricing. But I think for pricing, I think it kind of starts with how much do you need? You know, like, I think we don't think about what we need. We think about, okay, how are we able to show up for our clients? But I'm not able to show up for my client if I'm not getting compensated appropriately for every job that I do, right? Because if I undercharge, and I'm not saying this to you specifically, but just in general, right? If I know that I need a minimum of 2,000 a day, but I acquiesce every single time, and I'm sorry, my fault. I have no idea what that was. I'm watching a Great British Baking Show and it just turned back on.
Good
Pricing. But you know, if you're looking at your numbers and it's saying, you know, your fixed expenses plus your desired profit, you know, gives you, you know, I need to have a minimum of a $2,000 job every time, but you acquiesce because you want to bring in the client. And so now you're saying, no, I can say 1,000. Okay, well, if you need $8,000 a month, so now you've doubled the amount of work that you need to do, right? Right. So it's just kind of like thinking from that perspective, like, you know, Jay-Z has the quote, men lie, women lie, numbers don't. Like, that's what I think about when it comes to how should I appropriately price my services. And it takes practice. I think it takes practice to start being comfortable of saying, no, I don't offer a day rate. I mean, a half day rate, or this is my day rate and this is how much it costs for overtime. And, you know, does that scope of work make sense? Like, I really want this to work. I find that when you continue to show up as the expert, clients have no choice but to respond in kind, you know? And so it could be an experience thing, but I don't have a lot of experience where that not being the case. So I don't know if that helps.
It does help. You know, everybody does it differently. And I think it's so important that we have these really candid conversations about pricing and stuff, because it makes us all like look out for each other, you know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm really curious about your approach because I'm learning it from somewhere else. And so I'm happy to learn what you're doing. And, you know, there's a lot of ways to do it right. And there's a lot of ways to do it wrong. So
Absolutely.
thank you
And
for
I
your
think
feedback.
Yeah, and I think it's all about what feels good to you, but still making sure that you're not eroding your boundaries in the process.
Yeah.
You know, because I can tell someone you should charge 3,000 a day, but if you don't feel comfortable, like, I'm not going to press or force anyone to charge that. But then my follow-up question to that is that enough for what you desire? Like, how you want to live your life and how you want to run your business. And so that is the follow-up question that I like to ask people, because then it kind of starts to put the mirror in front of them, you know, as opposed to me being Joan of Arc. So yes, Sam, if I recall, on the invoice breakdowns that you show, you did not, yes, you did not break out the producer line. Is that because you were also shooting and you rolled that rate into the shooting rate? And I know you mentioned that it's sometimes a fixed fee and sometimes a percentage. How's that negotiation with the photographer? That's a really good question. So to answer the first question, Sam, I would say this is the first year where I am stepping into the producer role officially. So the invoices, I think the first one was from 2021 and the second one was from last year. I honestly didn't even think about it. And I know some photographers may cringe for me saying that, but I think you don't know what you don't know. So I was very happy with the rate that I was providing in terms of the usage and also my day rate as a photographer. And any other services that I did, I kind of just, I don't know, I just did it. Like kind of how I talked about at the beginning of our presentation. Like there's a lot of things that we do just because it's second nature and it's a part of the gig, but we don't think to actually move it out and say this is a completely, totally different role altogether. So that's how I would answer that for those two, or for that first question. I know you mentioned that it's sometimes a fixed fee and sometimes a percentage. How's that? I think first it starts off, what is the total budget? So like speaking with Carlene, because I actually asked her this too. I was like, okay, girl, like I'm about to start producing for other photographers. Like how exactly, like how do you get paid for this? There's different ways of doing it, but those are the two most common. The first step is, or not the first step, sometimes it depends on if the brand is directly hiring the producer and then they want you to do all the work, or it's the photographer that's bringing you on. So I find sometimes it depends on who is bringing who on in order to do the job. So I actually just wrapped up doing day of coordination, like producing for Destination DC. And in that instance, I mean, it was very kismet because I knew the managing director and also the photographer in this case. But the photographer was the person who brought me on. So she actually worked with someone to help her break down the budget. And then I asked her, well, what's the day rate for the producer? And so she gave me the day rate. But because Destination DC was completing the payments, I invoiced Destination DC. But I already knew what the day rate was because of having that conversation with the photographer. So I think, I don't know if that answered the question. It really depends on who brings you onto the project. But a lot of the times it's like knowing what the budget is first. Usually from asking around, sometimes it is the same day rate as the photographer because they consider them like the head. If you think about magazines, like the masthead. So the top line, usually the producer goes right above that and they should be being paid the same. Also depends on the complexity of the project because the bigger the project, the bigger the rate, really for everyone. And so that really depends. I know there's so many variables in our business, so I can't even like really say this is how it is. I think it just depends on context. So I hope that helped, Sam. Thank you for the question. That was actually really, really good.
Tamera, I did want to roll it back a little bit. There was a previous question from Marie in the chat. She's asking, she's curious if you spend your time educating the client on basic copyright law principles and usage fees.
Oh, Marie. In the very beginning, I did. In the very beginning, I did. I find, and other photographers may agree, especially like when you're first starting out, like I would say within the first 3 years before you realize, I think it's time to transition my clientele to maybe commercial or corporate where these conversations don't really happen. But I found that working with smaller businesses, there's just a different approach to how they consider copyright and usage. And so what I used to say to clients is that unless it's explicitly stated in the contract, copyright is not passed over at the time of final payment, right? So that's one. Number two, there are laws for this. And it's 2023. There are laws for this, like the copyright law of 1978. It actually was signed in 1976, but it was put into law in 1978. That pretty much states that photographers or any artists, they own the original copyrights to their art, unless it's explicitly stated where there will be a transfer of those rights. And then like sometimes clients will say, well, I could just hire you work for hire. And I think people think that's like a flex. Oh, I'll just, work for hire. Okay, work for hire means that I would be passing over all of my rights, which means you need to pay me more, right? So it doesn't, people will say, oh, work for hire. I can pay this person $22 or whatever. No, actually, it means I am signing my life away of these assets because you're going to use them in perpetuity and however you want, which means, and I'm not charging you royalties, right, for every time you use this. So I need a dollar amount that I'm happy with that will allow me to sign a work for hire agreement. And I try not to make it emotional. I think that's the other thing too. Like sometimes we'll say, well, this is my work. These are my things, like I'm talented and that's great. Like that's why they hired you. But I find like just keeping it baseline, like this is the law. This is not what it means. This is actually what this means. And allowing that potential client to make it the decision. And you may start, there may be pushback. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like there won't be. But I'll be honest, any brand that approached me and I explained to them what the copyright usage is, and they said no, I never regretted it. I don't look back at those projects and say, damn, I wish I said yes. I probably saved myself a lot of heartbreak, and a lot of turmoil, or, a lot of, I don't even want to do this anymore, right? So I don't regret leaving money on the table when I know it's just not a beneficial relationship for me. And then I just started working for commercial brands, because commercial brands, like the conversations are different. It's more like negotiating, or with bigger companies or corporate, it's more like negotiating how much as opposed to the why. Like then it becomes a conversation of logistics. Okay, like what do you need? How much do you think this will be? As opposed to, not to sound mean, but the rudimentary of the reality that you don't own these things. So, I hope that helps, Marie. That's a good, yes. It's not a good start to the relationship. Yes, exactly that. It creates a very unbalanced relationship that you just, you're going to be dealing with this person or company for several weeks, probably, in your life cycle of the project. And so you want to make sure that you're starting, on the right foot. I mean, oh, man. I mean, I have one story where a client wanted to work together. It's not usage related, but the budget was 13 grand and they wanted headshots and all these other things. And I was like, okay, fine. But they weren't willing to agree to my terms of, one, signing the contract, which is the non-negotiable. They signed the contract, I'm sorry, but they weren't very clear on payment. They kept kind of changing the scope of work at the last minute. The rep was unresponsive. They would say, oh, we're sending it to accounting for them to process it. Now, how are you going to process it when you don't have my W-9? and you don't know how to process the payment, you know? So yeah, I had to say no to that project. Yeah. Yeah. Elsie, let's chat offline for sure. Let's chat offline for sure. For sure. I think there are some, I don't know if you follow this person, and then I'm going to wrap it up, but there's a photographer that I follow. Her name is Rachel Kornick. Her Instagram is To Love Studios, and she does a lot of cocktails and food work. And she's not even based in the US. She's based out in Canada, I believe. But I think she's really great. She's a really great resource because she is very food and cocktail focused. She's hella amazing. And there's one more. So we'll chat offline. I will text you, girl. But thank you so much for your questions. I'm gonna quickly wrap this up. If you liked what you heard, as Mike shared earlier, I am a future author, and I also talk about this stuff on my Substack. So my platform is called the Photo CEO, and the Photo CEO, it is an acronym, and it's an acronym that breaks down my 3-step framework for building a sustainable photography business without the fluff. If you could not tell, I try to give it straight with a little bit of chaser or no chaser at all. But the C stands for clarify. This means establishing your competitive advantage, which is you and all that you have to offer, and your point of view to attract your dream clients or your dream audience. The E stands for engage. So understanding the marketing tools and the platforms that are aligned with your personality and your work and energy capacities. Now, this is very different from just saying, just post on Instagram all the time. You may realize, like, based off of where your clients come from, that Instagram may not be the best place for you to market your services. And so that's what engage covers. And then organize, which simply is simplifying your systems in the back of house so that you can build a repeat client base. Repeat clients, they tend to spend on average 20% more. It takes less to keep a repeat client than it is to bring a new client on board. And so I talk about that in the Photo CEO. So the Photo CEO Substack is where I share all my thoughts. I really mainly talk about negotiations, ways that you can market your business, my marketing rules, or things that I have done that have helped me that you can kind of use and curtail for yourself. Also a lot of not a lot of mindset, but just different ways of thinking about certain things. So in the last couple of weeks, I posted, like, why don't you charge more? Like, obviously there's, a huge pay disparity between men and women. And then when you look at, between, white men, women of color, or non-binary, that gap widens tremendously. But sometimes we stop our success before it even starts. So, like, kind of talking about that. And the tagline is charge what you're worth is shitty advice. Here's the real tea. I'm sharing the good, bad, and ugh, because sometimes it's ugh of running a photo business. Actionable advice for humans. So if you want to check that out or subscribe, it is free to subscribe. You're going to go to the photoceo.substack.com, and the book releases early spring 2024. So I'm currently in the editing phase. It's going to be great. It will also include interviews from other women photographers because I believe representation matters, and it's important to see yourself and to learn more about the book, or just for updates, you're also going to subscribe to the photoceo.substack.com. So thank you. Here's all my links. I would say screenshot it. That would probably be the easiest thing to do. Screenshot this thing. You can find me on Instagram, LinkedIn, or Threads, where I'm a little bit unhinged there. It's fun times over there. I actually have my own website, tameradarden.com. But if you want to learn more about Kim Productions and what we do, and also see the rollout of the talent that we're representing, you're going to go to createwithken.co. And Instagram and LinkedIn is there, createwithken_. It's going to be the same for LinkedIn as well. Screenshot. And I'm going to close it out. So stop share. There we go. So thank you thank you so much. Was reading the messages to see if I missed anything. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, if we have time, if it's okay, Mike, if it's all good.
We can certainly stay on for a little bit if anybody has more questions. I know no one will be upset if somebody has to leave, because I know we've gone for an hour.
Yes, so feelings not hurt.
That's right. I do want to say thank you very much for doing this and for everything that you share. You know, that's so helpful to the industry. It's really wonderful, and I appreciate everything that you showed today. That was really fantastic.
Yeah, so. Thank you so much. Thank you so much again for the opportunity. I will be right now, I'm like dealing with some personal stuff, but if anyone wants to, I think I may be opening up some time in November for like one-on-ones with people. So to get access to that, I can actually let you know, Mike, for APA members. And then also it'll be available on the photoceo.substack.com if anyone wants to follow there. But yeah, thank you so much.
Wonderful. Okay. All right. We'll look forward to that. Thanks everybody for joining us today. Tamera, thank you so very much for so generously sharing everything with us. That's fantastic, and we're looking forward to the book and continuing to follow you online.
Me too.
Okay.
Me too.